All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I've been asked about the situation in Syria, and I can say that we are closely monitoring developments on the ground and reiterate that the protection of civilians must remain paramount. All parties have a clear responsibility to avoid actions that could endanger civilians, inflame tensions, or trigger further displacement. The Secretary General urges all parties to sustain de-escalation, uphold the ceasefire, and implement the details of the latest understanding without delay and in a spirit of compromise, with full respect for the rights, safety, and dignity of all communities. As Gaza remains in the grip of winter, another hypothermia-related child death was reported by the Gaza Ministry of Health yesterday. This brings the total number of reported deaths linked to cold weather this season to 9. Once again, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs calls for urgent solutions, including allowing the entry of batteries, solar panels, and other energy sources that are needed to set up communal heating spaces. Our food security partners have reached more than 860,000 people so far this month, with food packages distributed through 50 distribution points across the Strip. We also continue to provide some 1.6 million hot meals every day to people in need. On the health front, our partners vaccinated 3,000 children in the first 2 days of the 10-day vaccination campaign, which began on Sunday. The campaign aims to further protect children under 3 from vaccine-preventable diseases. And on Monday, the World Health Organization facilitated another medical evacuation of 21 patients and their companions to Jordan. However, more than 18,000 patients, including 4,000 children, remain on the list of people to be evacuated to receive medical care that is not available in Gaza. WHO called on more member states to accept these patients and for the reopening of the medical evacuation route to the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. Most of the people in Gaza continue to be uprooted, with some 1.3 million people estimated to be spread over 970 sites across Gaza, the majority of them in the cities of Deir el-Bala and Khan Yunis. Our partners working on water, sanitation, and hygiene warn that approximately 70% of Gaza City's total water production is currently disrupted due to challenges related to repairing the Mekorot water supply line. The line comes from Israel into Gaza and is located east of the so-called Yellow Line, where Israeli forces remain deployed. An assessment of the pipeline identified the need for a section of steel pipe that is not available in Gaza and is restricted from entry into Gaza as a dual-use item. A request that one of our partners made to repair the Safa well, another important water source for Gaza City, was denied by the Israeli authorities on Sunday. Our partners are looking at alternative water sources and scaling up water trucking to ensure continued access to safe water. OCHA reiterates the need for expanded access, including to critical items deemed as dual use, without which improvements to the most basic of services, such as access to safe water, will not happen. The Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, is departing Switzerland later today and will continue to Copenhagen, Denmark, where she will deliver a keynote address to the Danish Parliament on the topic, The Future of the United Nations in a Turbulent World. During her visit, she will also meet with senior government officials on the UN-Denmark partnership and discuss pathways to advance the 2030 agenda. Following her visit to Copenhagen, the Deputy Secretary General will also travel to France, where she will participate in the International Day of Education event organized by UNESCO on Friday, the 23rd of January. The event is focused on the role of youth in co-creating education systems that are inclusive, resilient, and fit for the future, and will build on the outcomes of the Transforming Education Summit, highlighting the importance of youth leadership and partnership in advancing education reform. During her visit, she will also meet with senior government officials and other stakeholders. The Deputy Secretary General will return to New York on Monday. Turning to Sudan, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs is concerned by the plight of thousands of civilians who are cut off from aid in North Darfur State. With active conflict continuing to escalate in the northwestern part of the state, local partners report that at least 2,000 families are trapped in the valleys of Wadi Gardi and Amsad, in the localities of Karnoy and Umbaru. OCHA tells us that fighting in the area is severely restricting humanitarian access. Meanwhile, conflict continues to displace people in the Kordofan region. The International Organization for Migration estimates that nearly 3,000 people were displaced between January 15th and 19th from the cities of Kadugli and Dilling in South Kordofan state, with some moving towards locations in White Nile state. Both cities remain under siege amid ongoing fighting as extreme food insecurity deepens, with famine conditions confirmed in Kadugli and similarly extreme levels of food insecurity in Dilling. OCHA calls on all parties to immediately protect civilians and civilian infrastructure and ensure rapid, safe, unhindered, and sustained humanitarian access to people in need. In White Nile State, local authorities and our humanitarian partners report that nearly 2,000 people have arrived in the city of Kosti over the past 3 weeks, placing more pressure on already overstretched services. Since late October, some 19,500 people have fled Kordofan to White Nile State. We and our partners are scaling up assistance, including food rations, tents, mattresses, tarpaulins, and water, sanitation, and hygiene services. But critical gaps remain due to funding shortages. OCHA appeals for additional funding so humanitarian partners can scale up life-saving assistance. This year, we and our partners in Sudan are calling for $2.9 billion under the Humanitarian Needs and Response Plan to reach more than 20 million people in need. From Mozambique, our colleagues at the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that the number of people impacted by the floods has climbed to 600,000. Many of the temporary centers sheltering some of those people affected by the floods are overcrowded and in need of humanitarian support. According to authorities, nearly 80,000 homes have been destroyed, damaged, or flooded in Mozambique. Meanwhile, in the province of Gaza, one of the worst impacted areas, the Masingir Dam remains above its safe operating level and continues to release very high volumes of water to reduce pressure on the structure. This is contributing to elevated river levels and ongoing downstream flooding, including in areas already affected. We, along with our humanitarian partners, continue to support the government-led response efforts, which are focused on evacuations and also on improving accommodation centers. Our partners are providing water, sanitation, and hygiene support, among other aid. For its part, the UN Children's Fund warned that flooding is not just destroying homes, schools, health centers, and roads in Mozambique. It is turning unsafe water, disease outbreaks, and malnutrition into a deadly threat for children. UNICEF warned that waterborne diseases and malnutrition are a lethal combination. UNICEF pointed out that even before the recent floods, almost 4 out of every 10 children in Mozambique were experiencing chronic malnutrition. Renewed disruption to food supplies, health services, and care practices now threaten to push the most vulnerable into a dangerous spiral, including risks of acute and severe acute malnutrition. Turning to Bangladesh, the International Organization for Migration has launched an emergency response following a large fire in a Rohingya refugee camp in Cox's Bazar early yesterday morning. Relief efforts are being carried out in close coordination with the government of Bangladesh, as well as humanitarian partners, to ensure timely and appropriate assistance to impacted families. The fire affected more than 2,000 refugees, causing extensive damage to shelters and facilities. No fatalities or major injuries have been reported. Beyond the destruction of shelters, the fire also destabilized the hillside terrain on which much of the camp is constructed, damaging drainage networks and public infrastructure, and increasing risks related to access and erosion. After the fire was contained, IOM deployed health teams and ambulances to support those with minor injuries and worked with partners to rapidly assess damage and immediate needs. In coordination with the World Food Program, emergency food assistance was provided, while affected households received emergency shelter assistance, blankets, floor mats, mosquito nets, and portable solar lights. This afternoon, the Security Council will meet for an open session on Haiti. The head of our political mission in Haiti, Carlos Ruiz-Massieu, as well as the acting executive director of the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, John Brandolino, will brief council members. And tomorrow you will hear more from Mr. Massieu as he will be here as our guest to discuss the situation in Haiti. The latest report by UN Trade and Development, based on preliminary estimates, show that global foreign direct investment rose 14% in 2025 to $1.6 trillion. But the report highlights that the headline growth overstates the recovery. A large share of the increase came from flows through global financial centers, while real investment activity remained fragile. UNCTAD notes that investment patterns point to widening divides between developed and developing economies, growing concentration in a small number of strategic sectors, and persistent weakness in projects most critical for sustainable development. There's more information online. And we say thank you to our friends in Copenhagen, Tallinn, Helsinki, Oslo, and Bern for their full payments to the regular budget. The payments from Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Norway, and Switzerland bring the number of member states on the honor roll to 22. That's it for me. Deji?
Yesterday, when asking whether the Board of Peace will replace UN, President Trump, well, first said might. Secondly, he showed his disappointment at the UN. Does the Secretary General have any reaction or response to President Trump's disappointment on the UN?
I think that we've made clear that we are doing our utmost to improve how the UN works so it works well for all stakeholders. The Secretary General, as you know, has launched the UN 80 initiative designed to increase the efficiency of the UN. Beyond that, what I can tell you is that the UN will continue to relentlessly work for peace, in full respect for international law, and with a comprehensive effort to address the root causes of conflict to ensure sustainable solutions for peace.
Speaking of disappointment, has the U.S. paid any of the contributions since last time we asked the question?
No. Yes, please.
Hi, Farhan. Mitch McCann, Feature Story News. Thank you for the briefing. Further to Dashi's question about the Board of Peace, in the last couple of hours, a number of countries have reportedly accepted Donald Trump's invitation. Is the Secretary General of the view that the Board of Peace itself undermines the work of the United Nations? Is this a competing organization?
There have been any number of organizations, regional organizations, defense alliances, and others that have coexisted with the UN over the 80 years that the UN's been in existence. It's too early to tell what the Board of Peace will look like. One thing we are aware of is, of course, that the Security Council has endorsed the Board of Peace strictly for the work on Gaza. And of course, we continue to abide by that resolution. What happens in the future, we'll have to see. Pam.
Thank you, Farhan. A little follow-up on Davos. The Secretary General is not there because he's ill, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
he's had a cold. He's working from home today.
Okay, and will he be, or will his office deliver any kind of written text? The PGA spoke. Is there any other response to President Trump's speech?
Well,
I mean, on Greenland, for example,
on the question of Greenland, we've made clear that we expect all nations to abide by the United Nations Charter, and that, of course, enshrines respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of member states, and we will continue to push for that. On the speeches that are being made by different leaders, of course, as with what happens here at the General Assembly in September, world leaders are welcome to make their own speeches. The positions of the UN are made by different UN officials.
right. Just as a follow-up, is if it's possible, or if anything else comes out today on this, I mean, people would like to hear what the Secretary General's viewing on some of these issues that are coming up. Is there any possibility that he'd send out a readout or anything?
No, we don't do readouts of other people's speeches.
No, I mean just comments.
Nor do we do comments on other people's speeches.
But the
it's-
PGA does.
As situations arise, we deal with those situations. We don't deal with the rhetoric of different peoples around the world. We have our own positions, and we make clear what those positions are.
Thank you.
Namo?
Thank you, Farhan. With credible reports of abuses against Kurdish communities and escapes from ISIS detention facilities, and the potential for growing regional instability, my question is what the Secretary General thinks of this apparent global inaction on Syria, and at what point does inaction itself become a failure of responsibility? Thank you.
Well, you weren't here for the start of the briefing, but I read out about the developments in Syria and stated the Secretary General's view that the protection of civilians must remain paramount. And he went on to say that all parties have a clear responsibility to avoid actions that could endanger civilians, inflame tensions, or trigger further displacement. And certainly our expectation is that all parties, including the parties in the region, will work to make sure that the current understandings are upheld and that the rights, safety, and dignity of all the populations are protected.
But like, for example, we haven't seen a single member state to call for a UN Security Council session. There's this lack of global attention or inaction on Syria. What does he think of that?
Well, the Security Council has repeatedly dealt with the situation in Syria. It's up to them to determine what further to do with this situation in the northern part. We certainly will continue to draw attention to matters, including through the work of our special envoy. Alex, and then Farhan.
Thanks, Farhan. I have a quick follow-up on Deputy Secretary General's trip to Denmark. Could you please share some details on whether it's somehow connected to the recent developments with Greenland?
I think it's as I've said it, that the reason she's going to Denmark is to discuss the UN Denmark partnership, the 2030 agenda, and to deliver a keynote address to the Danish Parliament. So those are the topics at hand.
Will she mention Greenland somehow?
If we have anything further to say about Greenland beyond what we've said so far, we'll let you know at that point. Yes, Farnoosh.
Thanks, Farhan. You mentioned at the top about all of the efforts and initiatives that the UN is undertaking, UN 80, the reforms. We recently saw the news about UNDP moving its offices to Spain and other countries because of efficiency reasons and expenses. Is the UN doing anything beyond that initiative as of right now, as it's seeing a number of countries, Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, Pakistan, Qatar, joining this board of peace? And how worried is the Secretary General and top UN officials about this effort and the fact that it's picking up speed?
Well, the Board of Peace, as in terms of what it will do, remains amorphous. We'll have to see what it does. We are sticking to our program. The UN has its charter, has a lengthy history of achievements, and a large set of mandated tasks that we have to do constantly. And we're going about with those. We're not worried about any other grouping, and indeed many of the groupings that we've had to deal with, whether they're regional entities, sub-regional organizations, or defense alliances, are ones that we have had relationships with as they proceed. In terms of the other things the UN is doing, in terms of working with member states, I mean, obviously we continue to reach out to all member states, to all different bodies. The Secretary General will next month be visiting the African Union. He visits the European Union, different governments, and we continue to work with them in efforts to build up our partnerships, but also to advance our collective work for the betterment of the world's people. Benny.
Just before I start, can you break down, you said that Denmark paid its due, can you break down the autonomous Greenland's part in this?
That's a very odd question. For what it's worth, Denmark's dues came out to, I believe, what is it? $17 million of payment.
Okay. On Syria. So ISIS, as far as I remember, is deemed by the Security Council and the UN as a terrorist organization. Does the Office of what is it called? Anti-Terrorism Office here? Is it following that those reports that hundreds, maybe thousands, or dozens, maybe hundreds actually, managed to escape from prisons and could reinstate ISIS.
We expressed our concerns at yesterday's briefing about the situation involving the potential escape of detainees, and we certainly hope the authorities will follow up and make sure that the situation of those who have escaped is dealt with.
I'm not interested so much in concerns, but whether there's any data, any information that anybody at the UN, including the Office of Counterterrorism, has gathered on that situation.
Well, we have data. If you look at the reports of the Office on Counterterrorism, there is data about different groups, including those affiliated with Daesh. As you know, there was a body dealing with Daesh at the United Nations, and we continue to follow all of the activities of affiliated groups.
I'm
And
talking about
those are
events of
reported
the
on
last few
regularly.
days, not
What?
about past reports.
Well, we'll need to evaluate what happens. Obviously, this is a fluid situation on the ground, and we'll have to see. It's hard to say at this stage how many people have escaped, but certainly we will be in touch with the Syrian authorities and try to get further information about what the nature of this situation has been,
And the Kurdish authorities?
and with the SDF and others. Yes, yes, please. Yeah.
Farhan, the U.S. military just announced that they'll be moving 7,000 IS fighters from Syria to Iraq. Is this something that worries the UN?
Well, we certainly hope that that the situation and any movement of troops to Iraq is coordinated with the government of Iraq and with full respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Iraq. I believe that there's someone online who is Abu Sufyan. No? Okay. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
I'm here, Farhan.
Okay. All right. What's your question?
Okay. By UN report, we've seen that at least 14,000, the 100 people were killed in July uprising in Bangladesh. And a Bangladeshi court has ruled against former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina for ordering the killings. She is now in India, and India is not handling her over to the Bangladeshi government. Will the UN Secretary General call on Indian government to hand over her to ensure justice?
We believe that there should be accountability, and as you know, as you just pointed out, it was the United Nations itself that provided the factual information about the killings that took place. Obviously, there needs to be accountability, but it needs to be done with basic respects for international law. Have a good afternoon.